Yeah, Josh, you're right. The audience wants to hear us talk about buttholes, eating buttholes. We were kind of brainstorming agenda. We thought we'd spend, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes on Bitcoin, but the rest of it's going to be yogurt,
Let's just start out talking
sun,
about
and
dining
buttholes.
on buttholes. Yeah.
Yep.
Whatever lighting you've got going on, you've got like a Trump look to you right now. You're fading in and out of Trump orange.
1 second here. I'm going to go back in the cam studio. Wait, let's get this squared away here. Dude, I've been away from
I think you should rock the Trump orange. It sounds like
Trump's
Trump's on board for Bitcoin. So who cares about the Civil War? Like, as long as Bitcoin goes up in price, we're okay with that, aren't we?
Steve, I'm off my game, dude. I've been off the mic. I completely fucked Josh, left him high and dry. I've been wrapped up and involved in this this promotional process at work. It kind of, I feel like I'm a bee that just stung someone and needs to go like buzz away into a bush and just fucking die. But Josh held down the fort, and I appreciate that. It does feel good to be back on the mic to see both of your faces. I'm pumped to be here today.
Well, I'm excited to be your inaugural welcome back pod, man. It's great to see you both again. I always love coming on.
Same.
You were strategic. We were like, and I mean that. We were like, let's bring Steve on. We can talk about buttholes and sunning ourselves. And it feels like the perfect symbiosis between getting back into some macro, some high level Bitcoin, and some nonsense. And boy, is that our MO. And I need it this morning. I'll tell you that. So yeah, absolutely. Steve, how are you? Let's just get a little update on you.
I'm good, man. It's been it's May, it's early May. First 4 months of this year, over at Swan and in the Bitcoin market have just been it's just been a blitz, like super high activity, super high demand from January, the ETF launch, start of the year. And, just coming into this, we were running on all cylinders. But I mean, that's amazing to see, right? Like you have just like tremendous demand from new segments, family offices, just a ton of interest post this ETF launch. And so just, you build a company in the Bitcoin space to really take advantage of those kind of moments in time. So, a little cooler in this consolidation lately, but it was just a, amazing start to the year, I think, for so many.
Yeah, I imagine being in that seat is a lot like investing in Bitcoin. There's a few days a year that have got to be just complete pandemonium for you guys as people are just onboarding. And then it's radio silence for a while. And those days are unpredictable and they show up out of the blue sometimes. And you just don't know when it's going to be.
Yeah, directionally, yes. Like it's not like quite so quiet outside of that time. Like there's a good baseline of people that are, very engaged, regardless of market conditions. But you do see these massive periods of increased demand and spikes and these various things where it's just all hands on deck. It's 80-hour weeks. It's just like meeting that demand and interest and onboarding those people.
Have you guys thought about just shutting down Swan randomly in solidarity with Coinbase when they go down?
In this together. Brother in arms.
Very hard to prevent that. So I could pitch the idea to product, but we're going to try to stay up.
Might be a lukewarm reception there.
Yeah.
I was going to say, in reference to your specific position, we were talking about this a little bit in the room before. Yes, you are sunning yourself. You've got some fucking palm trees behind you. I don't know exactly where you are, and it looks cush. And by the way, you look yacked too. You look fucking yoked, dude. It's impressive. But you have a position where when somebody calls, there's no such thing as, hey, I'm out mowing the lawn. Like if someone wants to move 500K in Bitcoin or $1 million in Bitcoin, sure, guess who's there? And so you have the type of position where you necessarily need to be on beck and call. And that's demanding. And I'm sure the hour count can get ass fucking tronomical. Did I throw the fucking in the right spot there? Ass fucking tronomical. Yeah, I think that worked. Yeah. The hours could get astronomical, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's right on the money. It's, and that's part of, that's actually part of the role demands a level of like lifestyle integration because there's no weekends, there's no off hours. It's what you said. If clients are knocking on our door wanting to do a large Bitcoin purchase, like Bitcoin's 24/7, and we have to be for the most part. And so a lot of even like my stuff is like I had to find a way to make that work well. And, that's what you see online. And, it's obviously it's a remote work. So I'm able to blend that in with all of my habits and walking and sun and everything. But it's like, that's a necessity, right? Like if you're gonna just run that marathon where there's no clear off hours, like you need something like that. You need something that's going to keep your head in the game and energy levels good. But it's like, yeah, I mean that's Bitcoin, and it's a lot of fun, and it's like great to see the interest and the demand coming from new people that are seeing Bitcoin and understanding Bitcoin for the first time. So I mean, I love it, but it's you're right on the money. I mean, it is like that.
Yeah, as a lot of new entrants to the space, obviously you guys see that all the time. Many of them may not be familiar with the way this kind of works, and as we've seen over the last 2 to 3 cycles, the halving kind of comes and goes, and a lot of people newer to the space who've seen what happens 6 to 12 months afterwards kind of expect immediacy, like what's going to happen here. And then there's this kind of banality that's going on right now that happens. It seems to repeat itself, and if you're not familiar with it, you'll probably be disappointed with how things turn out, at least in the meantime. How are you seeing the market overall, like over the last year and then into the next year or so?
Yeah, great question. So, and I mean, I talked to a bunch of reporters before the halving and one yesterday after the halving. And, my message before the halving is like, as we all know, this is not like an immediate thing. This is not like a stock split. It's not like nothing's going to happen the day, the week, the month after, right? It is, it's two things. It's one, there's like a supply impact. So I think it's at like roughly average prices, like $35 million a day of sell pressure is taken off the market. 1 day, 2 days a week, that doesn't have much impact. 2-3 months, we're talking, excess of billions of dollars, right? That's material. So there's kind of a long-term buildup impact there. And then there's also I think the real impact of the halving is not that programmatic component, but it's all of the attention that gets put on Bitcoin. It's I mean, there's no time you get more calls from reporters if you're in that space than during the halving. I was on NPR, I was on CNBC, I was on all of these various things, Wall Street Journal multiple times.
Did you go white? Did you go wife beater, guns out on those interviews or no?
I did not. I saved that,
dude. God damn it! I thought more of you.
I know. I mean, outside. I mean, this is my interview setup. I'm outside. I do wear a polo, but man, I mean, it is Bitcoin summer. We're ripping pods. We're wearing tank tops. You got to get your head in the game, man. Bitcoin summer.
Let's go. Let's take these shirts off, Josh. What the fuck are we doing?
I didn't shave my chest.
Push some people
it's
over.
a little too bushy under this shirt right now. I gotta be shorn first.
Josh is a straight up.
I need help at the firehouse with that. Actually, I was gonna see if anyone would be willing to shave my back and my butthole, but
yeah,
so far no takers.
Check in with the guys. Hey, anybody free? Maybe that's a probationary task.
Not really. Yeah. Well, that might be really weird with our new probie, but we shouldn't probably get into that.
Yeah.
We have a new female firefighter. That would probably get us in some. I mean, she might not. She might get the joke. Maybe not. Maybe she would do it. I don't know.
Let's not find out.
One way to find out.
That's my vote. Josh is, but before we get back on topic, he's in contention for the smartest person I've ever met, but he's also a straight up Neanderthal. Mm-hmm. He's a mixture of both, and it's fucking.
Dan's exaggerating greatly on both fronts, especially the Neanderthal front, but.
Life is a marriage of extremes, right? That's the truth, man. You don't want to be in the middle. You want to be passionately at the extremes and bring them together.
Yeah.
You know?
We totally fucked your train of thought. Where were you? Yep.
I have no idea.
Bitcoin 2024 is moving to the heart of Bitcoin country, Nashville. Nashville just feels like the proper place for a Bitcoin conference. I can't guarantee we will be on main stage, or side stage, or even performing a puppet show. I can, however, say that we will be hanging out with the plebes, and if we have no obligations, we will very likely be getting drunk. Bitcoin Magazine is introducing a new event this spring, Bitcoin Asia. It's shaping up to be an unmissable experience. Stay tuned for more info. Whether you want to visit Bitcoin Asia or Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, we have a coupon code for you. Use coupon code BCB for 10% off any ticket to either event. That's code BCB.
Right. So having market interviews, right. So, there's a lot of attention that comes on to Bitcoin during the halving time. Like everyone wants to talk with you. Everyone wants to know, hey, what's going on with this halving thing? How does it work? What should, people expect? And I always said, hey, this is going to play out over time. It's not going to be an immediate impact. That's what we're seeing. But so, April was a down month. We're now recording this. We're back around 66. Nice run up. I think we're in a recovery here. But so why did that happen? My view and like what I've been telling clients is that, so you had this just enormous run up of Bitcoin prior to the ETF launch and post the ETF launch, right? I mean, just amazing performance. So some consolidation is totally natural. But if you look at markets broadly during that April window, none of the best performing assets of the year or the last 2 years made new highs. Nvidia was down, the S&P was down, NASDAQ was down, Microsoft down, Tesla down. Like Nvidia is really, I think, the kind of, thing to look at there. But, it obviously had a huge bull run in the back of soaring chips demand for AI applications. I mean, it went from close to $1,000 down to $700. It had a large correction. Everything consolidated. The S&P consolidated. And so what was that? Well, I think everything just has had a nice run. It's normal to see some consolidation. But B, this coincided with tax time. So you had investors sitting on a large amount of capital gains. It's been a bull run. Like this is not 22. People have gains, not losses. They're going to sell assets to pay those bills. But it's not just that they're selling those assets to pay bills. It's also that the Treasury receives north of $1 trillion in liquidity that now they don't have to issue debt to get. So it creates kind of a liquidity pocket to a certain extent where there's a pullback in the fiscal issuance. And, the market digested that. You also had oil running up, inflationary second wave, CPI making a new high. And of course, the kind of war jitters in the Middle East. It just wasn't a super constructive environment, but it also, in my opinion, the fundamental driver of this bull market, broadly speaking, in all assets, is this kind of, you have huge levels of fiscal issuance. You have a huge amount of debt, like almost record levels of debt in a high rates environment. And those high rates are those are compounding. How much, let's be clear, right? When the government issues debt and they pay payments on that debt, they are printing those dollars. That is money issuance. And the higher the rate goes, the higher the payments go on that debt. And the more debt they issue at the higher rates, the amount of kind of dollar issuance there increases dramatically. And so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing high rates is money printing. Also cutting rates would be money printing. So they're really kind of trapped. And so there's this fundamental picture that I think has been very bullish for assets and will continue to be bullish for assets because none of these things which interrupted that in April really have anything to do with that fundamental driver. And that's even putting Bitcoin aside. I think Bitcoin has secular themes that are quite good for it. You have the ETFs, you have a huge amount of focus going to Bitcoin away from the altcoin chains. You have, notable firms and funds announcing their ownership, huge support. So, I think there's a secular bull market in Bitcoin. I think there's a very broad kind of, we're creating a lot of money that's good for all asset prices. And none of that changed. So I've been bullish for a while. I continue to be very bullish. And I think that consolidation was natural and just the result of some of these, just kind of bump in the road factors.
Those are some really good points. In reference to the debt issue.
Yeah.
I haven't been looking at charts as much. And it's kind of interesting when you take a break and you come back with fresh eyes. And I think the best place to start when that's the case is go back to bare bones basics and fundamentals. We've been talking for fucking years about intervention and debt loads and government debt servicing costs and all this stuff. But you just kind of go back to the charts, you're recalibrating, which is sort of what I felt like I was doing yesterday and today. And just looking at federal government current expenditures, interest payments on St. Louis Fed, it's like, I knew it was going to look like this, but looking at a hockey stick, seeing it's clearly over 1 trillion, and remembering back to not that long ago when we were talking about like it could be over 1 trillion, then recognizing like there's no end in sight. Like the engineer is out of the fucking train. He just had a catastrophic LVO stroke, Josh, and this freight train is fucking barreling, and there's nobody to stop it.
Nothing
and then
stops.
like getting back up to date, like I was listening to Preston and Hoddle and Carlos Sare talk about Japan yesterday. Like, of course the swap lines are open. Like, of course we have all this BOJ intervention. Like it just the themes of, for me, the longer I look at this, and maybe this is naive, but just the simpler it becomes. Debt loads are crazy. Intervention is a stone cold fucking guarantee. And yes, it's going to be volatile. You're going to have medium-term adjustments where M2 does things maybe you don't expect. But overall, these trajectories are very clearly up and to the right. And if you're not hedging it, you're out of your fucking mind.
Yeah, the thing that is more concerning to me, understanding all that, and that was well put, is you see the urgency and the clawing for anything that's been going on. Like these ideas getting floated around about, what is it called? But basically the capital gains capital gains tax getting charged for not selling. What the hell is that called? Why can unrealized? Yes, Jesus, unrealized capital gains tax. Like just that idea getting floated around. It obviously won't happen anytime soon, but the idea getting floated around is dangerous. I mean, that would be just cataclysmic for capital markets in the U.S. Like money would flee as best it could. You know, I don't know where it's going to go exactly, but I mean, who knows, right? That is what is more concerning, because as they get squeezed, like you just said, $1 trillion in interest payments, right? That's their entire inflow for taxes this year, straight out the door.
Yeah,
it's just not sustainable unless, and they're going to be looking for the lowest hanging fruit. And you know, who are we going to rob is basically what they're looking at.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a precarious position in terms of certain outcomes. And you can see kind of the claws reaching out in this kind of fiscal dominance mode, and, you know, maybe the rumbling of capital controls. We're not there yet. I think the unrealized, you said the same thing, but like, I don't think the unrealized capital gains things pass, but you know, there is an exploration of like where they can start to rein, you know, kind of just more capital controls in. And, you know, that's likely. And it's, you know, I think there's been a sea change in the structure. And, you know, this is becoming more of a consensus view lately, that it's really kind of the fiscal situation that's running the show, that, you know, kind of authority has kind of switched from the monetary authority, which was the Fed. It's now really the Treasury. Some people were earlier to that. Lynn was earlier to that. I was earlier to that. During the SVB bank failure, I had tweeted a lot that it's like you're watching the Treasury now. It's not the Fed. It's not the Fed anymore. And that was due to like actually like I had learned a lot of stuff from this guy George Robertson, who's a little bit of a crazy guy on Twitter, but he was pounding the table on this in 22 and early 23. Like S&P is going above 5,000. There's no recession coming. It's you guys are looking at the numbers all wrong. And, you know, fortunately, it got me to take a second look at things. I think myself, like many others, like was in that camp of like, oh boy, this doesn't look great, recession, etc. in 22, late 22. But you know, him and a couple others got me to kind of change my tune in early 23, that is not the path we were taking. And that's become more of a consensus view now, obviously, as no recession has manifested and there's this huge amount of money flowing through the system. And that's going to continue. It's funny because Bitcoiners anticipated this as the outcome years back. But when the moment finally came, there were so many people caught on the sidelines because the Fed was raising rates. Yeah. And they missed the turn into this new mode with new rules. And we're in that now. And, I think that's obviously like more of a consensus view now. So, people got on board. But it is kind of ironic that as we kind of shifted into this kind of like, this kind of inflationary melting up market with lots of debt issuance, that a lot of people were calling for everything to crash because rates were high. Meanwhile, the rates had very little impact on the segments of the economy that mattered.
Well said. You said the word new rules. Josh, I love when Josh games out these very realistic scenarios, and I think he's someone to listen to. Like, he's calling, like, even if we take COVID, we take this stuff, there is a degree of realistic pessimism that's in order when you think about the rules changing. And I think, Josh, to what we've said to a lot of people with pensions in the fire service, like, there are guys, and I don't mean to undermine them, but they would say things like, they legislatively can't change our pension. Like, we're entitled to what it says we're going to get. Like, that's non-negotiable. It's like, dude, the rules can change on a dime. If the math doesn't work, the math doesn't work. And the people pulling levers look for solutions, right? If the Illinois firefighters pension system is a full-blown lopsided Ponzi and it's about to go up in complete flames, they will adjust the lines and the rules and the legislation to make it work, and you could get fucked. And if we take that same principle up many layers, they have a math problem that doesn't have a solution without certain people getting fucked, and that person very likely could be you. So someone that says they'll never do unrealized capital gains, I don't understand how that logic holds weight. They will do whatever they need. They will rob your fucking Roth IRA. Josh has been saying this for a long time. They will force you to buy a certain number of treasuries in your 401k. They will do all sorts of things if they have to, and there are no other solutions.
Yeah, so let's be clear on like one principle, and I think it's like key that people understand this. There are no limits to what power can do. It's not like you can only move where the power is, but like ultimately there's no law system structure that literally in a kind of like deterministic way actually limits what can or can't be done in some of these ways, obviously, like laws of physics, etc. But but also there's the second part to that, right? And it's that, in my view, we live in the most anomalous, distributed, centerless power structure that we've seen in the modern world, right? Like, our current system is not one where there is a leader and the leader has the power, right? That's that very early human civilization model where there's a king or there's a leader or a president, whatever. Even early America, let's be very clear. I wrote a recent article on FDR and how FDR is the closest thing to a dictator this country has ever seen. But also Washington, Lincoln, these men had enormous executive authority. The president could simply say, we're doing this, and that would generally happen. It was very different than the system we're in today, where it is countless distributed factions at a bit of an impasse, feuding while also looting the system, right? And then power has also spread out to non-governmental bodies, corporations, media, universities, these sorts of things. And it's this like very centerless tension, right? That it makes it much harder for power to act. But I actually think for some of these things to happen, you would have to see a reconcentration of authority in the hands of one person or body that actually has the ability to do these things, because right now it's incredibly fragmented. And that's producing a system where there's just like a slow slide, like a slow kind of careening. But I think like it is like if some faction, individual, president, whatever, like actually amassed actual systemic power, they could do whatever they wanted. in like taxes, gains, pensions, whatever, right? I don't think that concentration of authority currently exists, which is just, it's a data point to keep in mind.
Yeah,
of just
that's a great point, dude.
I
Yeah,
think
that is really good
usually
point.
like if you look throughout history how these type of things happen, it does take a long time. It's a slow bleed to like people have to be very desperate before they turn to a dictator, right? Like
Yeah.
Weimar Germany took a good 10 years of misery and like breadlines and things like that before they were like, all right, fuck it, we'll just try this guy Hitler. He seems like he's got some good ideas. But I don't think we're anywhere near that. I don't think any of us do. But it's kind of looking out over the horizon. Like if things continue to devolve like financially, that kind of bleeds over into everything, right? And that's where the worry comes in about like what levers can they pull. And those types of dictatorial themes can happen very quickly. It's like just like, you know, Bitcoin, it's slowly then suddenly, right? These things are, hopefully we can avoid any of that nonsense, but it is something to consider about how you approach protecting yourself.
And I don't think we're close to that either, but I think it's also like, just to put in one other variable there, like there's a lot of middle ground, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, there's like this formal dictator that seizes power. There's just, but there would need to be at least a material concentrating where, you know, it's maybe quasi in between these things. But I think right now, and I mean, you can see this, right? Like, for all the anti-Bitcoin, anti-crypto posturing of the government, right? That bill got vetoed, or not vetoed. It got overturned by the Senate the other day. The Biden administration tries to get the miners to hand over all their data, and like Riot sues them and it gets stopped. Like, this is the mark of a system which very much lacks true power to act. And that has protected, I think it has protected the industry, and it's protected us, and it's been a huge boon for Bitcoiners. But like in my basic heuristic is like, the moment if you start to see that concentrating, whether that's a dictator, whether it's a very popular president who gets enormous appeal, whether that's even a government body or an administration or an organization that somehow seizes the reins, that's the entity that I would be worried about.
Yeah. And I think another point to make here is that when we think about quote unquote draconian government intervention, we tend to go to the extremes. You're thinking of people knocking on your door. You're thinking of them just saying you can't buy Bitcoin. You're thinking of unrealized capital gains on your Bitcoin. I'm thinking the year is 2034. Mm-hmm. They have to have a buyer of treasuries. They don't have one. They say, okay, you want to use a Roth IRA instrument? You want tax-free growth for the next 30 years? You need for your purchases from this day forward, your old stuff can stay. From this point forward, 30% of your Roth IRA portfolio needs to be U.S. Treasuries.
Yeah.
98% of people in society won't care, right? Like most of our buddies at work will be like, oh, I don't really know what that means, but I'm told to put in my Roth IRA. Whereas for people like me, it's probably, okay, that's probably lights out on my Roth IRA contributions from this point forward. That's a big deal. But that's more of a benign, unsuspecting move that most people that are doing DCAs into set it and forget it retirement accounts won't give a fuck about. And so it's stuff like that, slow burn over time, that could add up to like, wow, this system's a lot less.
And that's also the hallmark of the current system, right? It's that sort of stuff, right?
Yep.
Those types of things never get introduced to everybody at once. Like the income tax is a perfect example. That was a 1% tax on the 1% when it started. At least I think that's accurate.
Yep.
It started in 1913 and it's bled over, over the last, 100 years or so to everybody all the way down the strata. It doesn't matter how, well, I guess there is an argument that if you make under a certain amount, you don't pay it, but you pay a massively higher rate across the entire board. And that's how they would introduce something like that. It's unrealized capital gains, guys, but this is only for billionaires. If you're a billionaire, we're going to fuck you over. And everybody would rubber stamp that, like, fuck the billionaires, But it'll take a decade, but it'll bleed into you eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It'll end up in your butthole, whether you like it or not. Dildos always find a way, dude. and some of them are jagged.
That Jeff Goldblum overview there.
I'm just
It's beautiful.
just looking for opportunities, dude, to slide them in here.
Dan's back and he's ready to go.
That one came in without lube too. Yep. What is up, folks? It's Dan here, and I'm going to take just a quick moment to talk to you about where Josh and I buy our Bitcoin, and that is at Swan Bitcoin. The two of us have now been dollar cost averaging on Swan for years, and here's why. It's user-friendly. The fees are low and transparent. Withdrawals are absolutely free. They offer attentive expert service, and Swan has a full suite of financial services, including an IRA product where you can roll a traditional or a Roth IRA into Bitcoin, Swan Private for high net worth individuals, and coming soon, Swan Vault for collaborative custody. In our view, Swan just gets it. They're focused on Bitcoin only. They provide really solid and ongoing education, and they strongly encourage self-custody. Maybe most importantly, it's low friction. Setting up and accessing a Swan account is so easy that it's boomer and firefighter proof. Keep that stack thick. That's THIC, no K at the end, at swan.com. Yep.
Here's the thing though, and this is the thing that I find lacking in the way many people, both pro-Bitcoin and anti-Bitcoin, think about some of these scenarios. So I can see this from kind of the government's going to shut down Bitcoin. They're just going to like blah, 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 this. And also from the pro-Bitcoin people of, they're just going to come ban this or ban that or do that. I think most people have let's call it a cognitive error, where if an entity is an order of magnitude more powerful than they are, they assume that entity has unlimited power because it is so much more powerful than they are. It's hard to think about the boundaries of that power. But that's false, right? The US government has many boundaries to what it is. Not an unlimited free actor. It can't do whatever it wants. And it's not because of laws. It's not because of like, the legal do this. No, literally watch this play out. Do you think they would like to have an unrealized tax on billionaires right now? Yeah, of course they would. So then the real question is, why don't they? What are the boundaries? And it's very hard. Like, I'm not saying I have an elegant model for exactly where those boundaries are, because it's kind of a dark forest. It's a fog of war, but they exist. And I just think when we're thinking about this and I think we assign a little too much ability to act, freedom of action to this very powerful entity. I actually asked a question of, I guess I'm not going to name drop them, but I asked the question of someone very, very smart who is very connected in US government and agencies. The question, if you had to assign an average IQ to the government as a whole, which meaning in aggregate, how intelligent is the aggregate intelligence of the entity? And this person said, under 100. As a whole, it isn't very smart. There are pockets of intelligence, but when you have it on like an organizational systemic level, right? Like a privately held corporation, I would say has a much higher organizational IQ than the block US government. It is very constrained as a result of its structure, size, and organization. And that's why so many people it would be super rational for the government to just realize the Bitcoin adoption curve and just ban Bitcoin in 2013. Yeah, why didn't they? Because it's not that smart and it has trouble acting. And this needs to be incorporated into our models of the world.
Really good point. Yeah, I think we ascribe too much credit. And the more disjointed and fucked up it gets, there are threats that come with that.
Sure,
right?
100%.
Like the more retarded a system becomes, the more threatening it is.
Yeah.
I wanted to drop a hard R in here too, dude. I got an agenda today. So, but also, the more disjointed and dysfunctional it becomes, the harder it is to turn the Titanic around. So there's kind of a disadvantage and an advantage that comes with that you've articulated very well.
Oh yeah. There's many costs. There's many risks to that sort of system. And especially not just like against us, the people, but against our geopolitical adversaries. And, the government has a job to do, and it's mainly don't get like a ring run around you by China, etc. Right. And so, yeah, there are huge drawbacks. But it's like, I just think that most people don't think of the entity, the government, very well. And you start to talk to people that are more plugged into the actuality of what it is really like, and you realize how bounded it is, how constrained, how inefficient, how information deteriorates quickly as it circulates through this entity, which is government.
Yep. One other, before I don't know what we're going to pivot to next. I'll leave that up to you guys. But there is something I wanted to hit that I think is worth the audience exploring and us being reminded of, and that's scams. I got the email from Swan the other day, just warning, like, hey, there's nothing to do with any exchange. It's just there are people out there telling you they're Nigerian princes, but they're dressed up in a lot of sexier, more sophisticated ways, and anyone that thinks they're not capable of falling for something like that, that probably comes with a degree of naivety. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I don't mean to completely put you on the spot, but what do you know about these sorts of scams, and what kind of warnings would you give people? Obviously, the starting point is get your shit off exchanges, get it cold stored. But do either of you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's also set the framework here. The scammers are watching this interview. Anything I say, like, it's an adversarial environment. If I say, oh, watch out for this, then they hear me say that, and then they change their tactics. So I have to kind of manage what I say a little bit. But that being said, so there's a lot of people being targeted, right? I would just say broadly, be very, very, very suspect of any phone call you get from anybody telling you anything about the security of your account, about hacks, resets, passwords, two-factor code. Like, generally speaking, your basic heuristic, your rule of thumb, companies are not going to call you. I don't care who it is. And I'm not going to name specific names because of the thing I said at first. But, like, be very distrustful of phone calls from people you've never spoken to, or people pretending to be people you have spoken to, or pretending to be companies you have spoken to, that are telling you things about security, passwords, two factors, blah, blah, blah. That is never. That is practically almost 99.9% chance never how a security issue is going to be communicated. And so take a breath, move slowly. Do not go into this panicked action mode where you need to rapidly do it. Just, don't give any information over the phone. If you really want to call a company back, you can call them back at the appropriate number. And if you're really concerned, I would recommend. Now, I'm not going to say I recommend you do that, because, like, let me be clear. Let me walk through this. If I say I recommend you call that company back, what'll happen is people will go to Google. They'll type in blah, blah, blah corporation. The first lead result will be a scam. It'll be a fake number. They'll call that number. They'll get hacked. They're very sophisticated. So you need to be aware of all this. But if you want to, identify the correct phone number. And if you don't trust yourself to be able to discern a fake website or a fake ad from a real one, don't call at all. This is it's a notable attack vector, and you need to be very, very conservative and even-headed, and like when you're getting these sorts of reach outs. Like I said, just rule of thumb, it's fake, because that is not how anything is going to be communicated, right? Like if somebody got your Coinbase account, Coinbase is not giving you a phone call. That's not going to happen, man. Like, so that's kind of rule number one. And obviously, like, self-custody, but I mean, there are scams that target people in self-custody, right? There are scams that are about, this is Trezor calling, this is Ledger calling. Oh no, very bad things have happened, my friend.
Yeah, we need your seed words so we can reinstate your account.
Yeah, like, don't trust phone calls. I think that's the best piece of advice of everything we're seeing right now. Don't trust phone calls.
Right. And you guys are never going to put a sense of urgency on somebody. Like, you're not, if you're getting a phone call from somebody who's trying to urgently, like, this is an immediate problem that has to happen this second or you're fucked, like, that's an immediate red flag that there's something going on here. They want you to be under duress, because under duress, you're not thinking clearly. Yeah. And that's when you get hacked.
Let's be really clear. And I think this is something I can say. Swan would never ask for you to take an action. Swan would just take an action. Like,
yeah,
we would lock your account. You don't need to do anything, right? Yep. So we're never going to call you and say, oh my God, you need to do X. No, like, if we think there is an attack happening, all actions would come from our side. So just, and that's true, I think, for pretty much most of these businesses. The idea that, like, there's an attack happening on one of your online accounts and that business is going to call you for you to do something instead of that business just doing it itself, that should not be your base assumption.
Yeah. Dude, the other thing about this that's stressful, I'm certainly not saying I'm immune or my family's immune from this shit. But once you've been around the block for a little bit, you understand some of the fundamentals. I'm not sitting around terrified about this. What does pucker my balloon knot a tad is walking other people through this. Yeah, sure. I recently had a buddy, I'm not going to go into specifics, Josh heard about it, but he did some startlingly dumb shit with Bitcoin, in my opinion. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, holy shit. I just didn't, I mean, I shared with him my bullishness. He took a lot of his own steps, touched base with me after, and I'm like, wow, I wish we could have touched base. You know, like, that was really stupid. It's almost, it's disheartening because it's like you want to share with other people. You want other people to get in, but you can't be around hand-holding left and right. And when you think about the novelty of this, the amount of exposure that people have that aren't familiar with how this works, especially when they're the turtle hatching on the beach headed to the ocean, like, people can get grabbed by pelicans and shit during that journey, and you can't intervene, dude. Pelican wants to feed, he's gonna fucking snatch up that baby turtle, and it's almost like you have to resign yourself and say, I'm not responsible for other people's money, but it does scare me talking to family, talking to friends, because nobody has any idea how this works.
I went and helped one of my friends cold store his stuff. He took a significant amount of money off Swan, and he wanted me to handhold him through the whole process, which I did. But people are so trusting. He's like, oh, I don't care if you see these words. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, for my own, like, benefit, I don't want to see your words, because if somehow you fuck up in the future and you're going to come back and say, like, I stole your money, right? Like, I don't even want to have, I want nothing to do with seeing that stuff, because not only, I mean, I wouldn't take his money, but I don't want that to be a question anywhere. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, that gets stolen and suddenly you can't help but think, and don't put yourself in that position.
Exactly.
These actors are very sophisticated, and you need to really have an adversarial mindset when it comes to your money, it comes to your Bitcoin. You like, it's a battlefield. Like, this is not the internet is an attack vector.
It's a turtle hatch, dude. It's a fucking turtle hatch is what it is.
Yeah.
Swan's just sledgehammering pelicans.
But just don't do things for people that reach out to you telling you to take actions. That's like, there it is. That is the rule of thumb. Do not take actions because people are communicating with you, telling you to take actions. Just keep going. If you're concerned, just keep going through the process until the the company you're using or whatever takes the action on your behalf, right? I think that's actually an incredible rule of thumb. As long as you don't do anything, like the hackers are not going to like benefit in that way. And like if you're actually talking to the real organization, they will be able to intervene on your behalf. I think there's vanishingly few I can't think of any circumstances right now where there's an action that you need to take for a centralized account security that the organization cannot take.
And to re-loosen orifices here, Bitcoin has very empowering technologies and opportunities. With that, though, you need to know how to use them. We have been harping for years now that if you are self-custodying and you have no clue what self-custody is, the basic fundamentals of how it works, you are exposed, right? But once you've gone through some basic steps with a reliable device, like a cold card or something, it is incredibly empowering. That's the best word I can provide. You understand the stone cold, transparent math of how this protocol enforces security, and you know where the exposures are, and they're very limited, and they're under your control, and that is cool. So for somebody that's listening going, wow, this sounds really overwhelming, I just don't want to hold this at all. No, options exist. They're quite simple. You just have to take some ownership and steps to get to a point where you can do the basics, and you can. Everyone listening can.
It is not hard. Like literally just don't give stuff out. Just don't give stuff out. You'll be okay. Like for the most part, like it really can be done very simply. And, you know, I'll show, like, I run the private client team for Swan. We help people do this every day. So like there are experts you can get in your corner to give you the right advice on how to set this up. So like it is doable. You know, it's obviously it's good to give some precautions against these sorts of attacks, but very simple principles can keep you safe.
Yeah. I want to pivot this to the Samourai dudes for a second and talk about their situation, because anyone watching, like if you're not very familiar with what's going on, this sounds really obvious. Like, oh, these guys were helping people launder money. That's bad. They should go to jail. It sounds really simple if you're just hearing the sound bites on, you know, TV about it. But the reality of it is that 95 or 6% of people that are using the Whirlpool service, which is just simply a way to obfuscate your ownership of Bitcoin for good, legitimate reason, because Bitcoin is a public blockchain. Yeah. Everyone can see everything, right? So if I send Dan 1 Bitcoin and I had 10 in my wallet, he knows he can follow that back and say, oh, Josh has got 9 more. I could, you know, there could be like nefarious people watching this and kind of cataloging and figuring out how much money you have to potentially rob you or do some other nefarious thing. So there's a good legitimate reason for having this service available for people to just maintain financial privacy for obvious reasons. So the way this is set up, though, it becomes a problem because they were a centralized entity that was helping construct these transactions, which all happen on the blockchain. There's no magic happening there. They're just the central entity hub, right? That constructs these transactions to help people out. Having said all of that, what are your thoughts on this being, I mean, that's obviously the government views this as, well, that 4% shouldn't be laundering money. And then we can go to like, well, Chase and, you know, Wells Fargo have been laundering money for cartels for literally decades. How do we, you know, parse through that? But anyway, the point is that people view this as an attack on privacy. We're not allowed to have any financial privacy anymore, according to our overseers, the giant evil government, which we spoke about earlier. So what are your just overall thoughts about this situation?
Yeah, so a few things. First on that thing, like, oh, like Chase launders money, it's not fair. Yeah, it isn't fair. Like, they're the approved money launderers. Like, get that through your head.
They're
like,
Epstein's banker. You shut the fuck up.
Like, they're the financial guild. They have, yes, they are the people who do that service. Yeah, that's how the system works, man. Like, it's not fair. So I think, so there's kind of two things to talk about with Samourai. One is like what happened and the future of privacy on Bitcoin. And two is like, what implications does this have? AKA, are they coming for self-custody, XYZ? So two things. The basic conclusion from Samourai / Whirlpool is, if you want privacy on Bitcoin, You need to build something decentralized that will do it.
Yep.
Yes.
And as the Tornado Cash trials show, you're at risk if you do so. So someone anonymous with very good anonymity needs to deploy code that simply does not have a central counterparty.
We need Satoshi back.
That is just the reality. Like, I'm sorry, but like that's what you're looking at, right? Like, if you want to spin up a centralized service where you provide privacy as a service, there's going to be people that use that for money laundering, and you're going to get dinged. Like, I'm sorry. That's just like, it's not a value judgment. It's not me saying that's good or right, but like, that's what's going to happen. So if you want this, there needs to be something that is not structured in that way. And like, as far as what this means, right? I don't see the straight line between Tornado Cash and some sort of amorphous self-custody ban. I really don't. This is a DOJ, like, it's a criminal case. Like, it was the DOJ. It was not Congress. It was not a FinCEN. It was not some sort of regulator saying mixers are illegal. We have passed a form of legislation that says this activity is done for. It was a criminal case. These are very different things. Like, I don't see, like, the DOJ is not going to bring a case against somebody that says, oh, you committed a crime by doing self-custody, right? Like, that's, like, realistically, guys, that, like, not speaking guys to you, but to the broad, like, that is not going to happen unless the world changes dramatically. Like, a self-custody ban is something that would have to come from Congress. And we just saw Congress knock down a thing that was going to constrain Bitcoin, right? That was the recent thing. Like, this comes back to my early point. Your mental model of the government is as a central actor with coordinated autonomy, and that is not what it is. I don't see the straight line. I don't see the, like, because Samourai in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to have this self-custody ban. I'm not saying that means we should throw our hands up and just, like, take a relaxed position and not build better tools to protect this, right? But it's also like, you know, there's a lot of dialogue going on right now about upgrades to Bitcoin and scaling self-custody. I have a nuanced stance on that, right? Like, yeah, we should do that. We're gonna need to do upgrades that scale self-custody. That's something that's going to need to happen. Like, and, you know, a lot of these kind of proposals do enable things that make that happen. They also enable other things, but, like, they do enable that. In my head, probably, like, at principle, like, on face value, if you can actually get that huge improvement in self-custody, a 10x improvement or whatever, like, accepting some sort of shitcoining as a trade-off for that is acceptable in my book. However, it's actually very unclear to me that having a 10x improvement in the efficiency of self-custody in any way protects us from a government ban of self-custody. Like, that is, there's like a hand-waving magic there. Like, dude, like, it's not like just because you have the technical capacity to do it, that then is the protection from this sort of assault. Like, the assault comes after all the centralized choke points, all the exchanges, all the hardware wallet manufacturers. Like, I don't care if you've made it 100 times more fee efficient. You can do more transactions on the network, and that's going to prevent the government from banning self-custody. Like, no, dude. I've, like, maybe I'm missing some sort of key ZK proof scaling cat data thing that I don't understand. I'm not a technical wizard, but, like, I don't care how efficient you make the network at doing this function. That doesn't protect you from a ban. So,
Right.
yes, I think it's good to scale self-custody, and we'll need to do that. But no, I don't see this as, like, a sufficient response if your concern is a self-custody ban, which, see, I also don't think is what's happening.
Yeah. I'm going to give some Samourai thoughts, and then, Josh, I'm curious on yours. So this next segment for me could be construed or may in reality be some beta statist energy. But I'm going to come in with this perspective a little bit.
Oh.
And I'm going to start by saying I was sick to my stomach when I heard what happened to the Samourai dudes. I think it's a fucking shame. And I want as much financial freedom as possible.
Sure.
But I'm also a realist about the date and time we live and the power structures that exist. And I have not done a ton of information gathering. A lot of what's going to come out here is from Joe Carlasare on with Preston. We'll link that episode down in the notes. He just talked about it last week. He talked about this case quite a bit. He's a lawyer who works on this shit. And all right. So at the end of the day, like the example I draw is that if you think taxes are bullshit, that's valid. Like taxes are bullshit, taxes are theft, blah, blah, blah. But don't be shocked when you're out there with emails and DMs and tweets that say you don't pay your taxes when you get fucked over by the IRS.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that the taxes are awesome. I'm just saying, like, if you don't abide by obvious laws, even if the laws are bullshit, and you say them out loud, like, you're gonna get pinched. And I don't know all the details, but I know that, like, they have emails and DMs that show some degree of direct contradiction or awareness that they're not following AML laws. Okay. And there's already some stuff out there with previous cases. And I get the whole, like, let's charge with the flag. But I do think, and I'm not even just talking specifically about the Samourai guys, I think there are a lot of hard-hitting, overconfident libertarians who don't understand the potential consequences of being really vocal about not abiding by clear standards that have direct pinch points. And the other thing that makes their case complicated is, like, they were the centralized coordinator. I understand they're using Bitcoin, but it was for profit. They were the centralized coordinator. They have correspondence that indicates some degree of awareness. This one could be, this could be a hard straitjacket to get out of. And I think it's a lesson for other freedom warriors of, like, I love the sentiment, but you're going to have to do it more privately, creatively, and legally. And yeah, at the end of the day, privacy needs to be more automatic on Bitcoin. It needs to be very decentralized. And maybe we don't get there for a long time. Maybe we never get there. Bitcoin's not perfect. And this is a flaw. This is a flaw of Bitcoin. Yeah. Bitcoin's got so many boxes it checks. This is one that it doesn't. It's a big deal. I get it. But this road of centralized mixing where you're taking profits from it, it's a dead end.
And those.
Have you been paying attention the last few years? If so, you know one thing. Not your keys, not your coins. This is a quaint saying, but it's real. If you're not holding your seed keys, you have a Bitcoin IOU, not Bitcoin. CoinKite is the maker of the Cold Card Mark IV. This is the industry standard for holding the keys to your Bitcoin. Holding your keys should not be intimidating, and it isn't. The Mark IV makes this an incredibly simple process. You could be a degenerate firefighter and hold your own keys. That's how simple it is. If you want to create a more complex setup, the Cold Card Mark IV has you covered there as well. You can create a multi-sig using a cold card, a tap signer, and even the upcoming Q1. Speaking of the Q1, if you want to have every bell and whistle and give yourself no boundaries as far as interacting with Bitcoin is concerned, the Q1 is your signing device. CoinKite makes some of the most sought-after gear in Bitcoin. The block clock, seed plates, the open dime, and the Sats card. Everything you need to secure your Bitcoin. Use code BCB for 5% off the Mark IV.
And those are all points as to why I don't see a straight line between the specifics of this case and a self-custody ban or something like that. Like, they're very different things.
There's you might have to correct me on this one, Steve. Maybe you know more than I do on this subject, but isn't the reason that it's all public there because it has to be auditable, right? So if it was not public, then you couldn't audit how many coins actually exist. So this was a trade-off in order to allow the short, to be absolutely sure that there is a limited supply of 21 million, that there can't be more. And I do wonder, and then I don't know the answer to this, but Monero is probably the best example of an alternative that provides a lot more security, or a lot more privacy, I should say. But can that be audited? Is there a way to be sure that there are X number of Monero? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I believe there is. So
Okay.
I believe one of the things, like, I'm not an expert on this, but I do think you can validate the total supply of Monero. I'm not promoting Monero here, but like, I
Yeah,
do
I'm not
think
either,
there are
but
very
it's just
clever ways to do these like ZK proof, yada, yada, yada things where you don't lose the kind of guarantees that underlie it. You just can't. I mean, there's obviously like, it's obviously traceability gets broken. Like, obviously, like there are certain forms of visibility, but the supply issue, just because you can't see everything in the same way, it doesn't suddenly give parties the ability to like issue more coins, right? Like, if that capacity isn't there, it isn't there. So, either way, like, I don't think Bitcoin's gonna have privacy on like the layer one as like this base thing.
Right.
I think the future is like there's some sort of layer two or roll up or thing where you can go get privacy. Is most likely the direction it goes in, or some sort of other service that some of the coins go through for privacy, rather than like, I don't think Bitcoin becomes like Monero where just the whole thing is private in that way.
Yeah.
Again, this is not my wheelhouse though.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it's not mine either. We're just kind of
Yeah.
tossing these ideas at walls, but it's interesting to think about. And I don't know, again, we're not technical wizards either. Like how, if there was an implementation to bring that technology to Bitcoin, that could cause a lot of other problems from exactly, you know, what Dan's outlining here. Like if suddenly Bitcoin becomes completely
Sure, that's a big
opaque,
part of
like
your
a lot of entities are not going to be real
Yep.
happy about that. And that could cause a lot of issues, as much as that is a cuck thing to say. And it might break through that very quickly or not. Like there's no way to really know how that
But it's
plays
a
out.
reality that some of these things, they put a target on your back. And I think a lot of the tensions I've been seeing on Bitcoin Twitter recently are, on one side you have this camp that's like, hey, we really should build these new features. It'll make Bitcoin way more robust. I'm willing to accept some shitcoining as a trade-off because of that. That's a valid stance. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that's like an invalid stance. That is a perfectly reasonable, like, there is obviously like, let's just do a theoretical example, 10x improvement in all the things they care about and a 10% increase in shitcoins. You take that trade all day. Like, it's not even close. That's obviously made up, and the real engineering landscape is more complicated than that. But so, I mean, it's a valid stance. But then you have this other stance that's like, guys, you're really underestimating the sort of scrutiny and regulatory problems that you could bring down on Bitcoin by
Yes.
enabling a lot of that activity. That is also a valid stance. And I think some of the developers that are like very pro charging forward, they underestimate that because they themselves are not operating like legal entities. And so then the pushback is like, oh, well, you just like, you know, you just want to make money and like run a fucking company, bro. You're just a big capitalist with your big business and like you don't care about freedom. And that's wrong. Like, I'm sorry, but if your vision of Bitcoin is one where all third parties are illegal, like you can't operate, I'm sorry, but you just slowed the development of Bitcoin down by an order of magnitude. Like, that's not a realistic scenario where we get into this fight that actually prompts governments around the world to just make being an actual business or service provider like illegal. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but like it is a realistic attack vector that if we bring certain kinds of activity onto Bitcoin that increase that risk, that's a real risk. Now, then the question goes, well, will these upgrades bring that type of activity to Bitcoin? And that's a whole other discussion, right? And, you know, it's one that I'm not, I'm trying to get more educated on it recently. I'm talking with devs and talking with different people. But let's just be really clear that, like, both of these stances are valid. It is valid to say we need to upgrade Bitcoin to make it better, and some amount of shitcoining, etc., is a valid trade-off for that. And it's also valid to say, hey, too much of this stuff could really make it hard for operators, and you don't want a world where it's illegal to manufacture a hard wallet, it's illegal to have a fiat Bitcoin exchange. Like, you don't want that. And if
I think it's also a realistic perspective. It's a realistic perspective from my view to remember that those implementations are waiting in the wings, right? As this thing digs its claws deeper and deeper into the collective consciousness, that can happen in the future. Like it's not off the table because we don't do it right at this moment. And I don't know exactly how that, time frame plays out or when that happens, if that happens, but
Yeah.
it's always something that can be implemented.
So
For
the
sure.
pushback you're going to get from the pro camp there is that these actual proposals give a lot of benefits and don't carry that much risk. And so like you never know when you're going to need it, and it is valid to kind of front run that. And on paper, without the specific risks and pros and cons in front of us, which I'm not educated on, I mean, that's a valid stance, right? If it truly is that we get all these benefits from this and a very small amount of risk, then they would be right. I don't know if that is the case. I don't know if these upgrades truly have all these benefits and very minimal risks. But if they did, that would be worth considering in my book.
Yes. Factoring in, as you just hinted at, Josh, the Trojan Horse dynamics, right?
Yes.
What is built to
real.
be the Trojan Horse? I will bet my right nut, my Dr. Kenneth Nosewater, as Ron Burgundy said, that Monero is not going to entrench itself in the global financial system and go up to astronomical prices. Sure. It's just not built to do that for a variety of reasons. Some of those sound cucky, as Josh said a second ago, but that's the reality. We have, in my estimation, the most potentially dominant horse that can be wheeled through the gates of Troy and is currently, I think, past the threshold. I think it is currently penetrated the gates of Troy. We are past the penetration point. The virus is now spreading inside the laboratory. And that's because of things like Bitcoin's auditability, which, as you articulated, Josh, it's open source. It's programmable, baby. And we have decisions to make as a community, as a hive mind moving forward. And it's not perfect, too. Dismantle the notion that Bitcoin is perfect. Yep. It is not. Nothing is perfect. It's a human creation. It's flawed, just like us. It's wonderful, but it's got some warts.
Yeah, we're threading a needle here. And you can't say that we're not. Like, the optimal path, there are two bad paths. One bad path is we just end up becoming hyper ETFization. It's just custodial Bitcoin. It's all in these silos. No one has the real thing. It just becomes another financial asset, like a neutered version of gold. That's unhappy path one. But there's a second unhappy path, and it's that we push all of the freedom money characteristics too hard, too fast, too aggressively. And we end up with just this niche payment network that never works its way into a dominant position because it's too adversarial to the current system. There is a middle road. There is a narrow path where you try to balance those two of those, and you benefit from all of the capital flows and not being in a red hot war against the power structures every day of the week. But you also maintain this core freedom money ethos. And the only thing we should be talking about is how to tread that narrow path successfully, right? I reject anything that isn't that. You veer too hard in one way and you lose, right? It's your example. I'm not here to have Monero, right? Monero is going to be on the outskirts for it's too adversarial. If I'm not saying fuck Monero or fuck the guys that do that or whatever. If you want to go fight for that sort of project, whatever, go do that. But to get something which is truly a global reimagining of a monetary system, you can't forever be the rebellion. You can't forever be this inquisition. You need to somehow become itself an institution while maintaining the core values that drew so many of us to it. And I will say, just personally, there's been a lot of animosity on Twitter and Swan taking shots and things, and people, there's some real distrust that because we are a business, we're a corporate entity, there's some sort of line of reasoning that says we just don't want to interrupt our profits, and keeping Bitcoin in this narrow space does that. I mean, that couldn't be further from the truth, right? Everybody at Swan is like deeply committed to Bitcoin, and none of us want to see Bitcoin as just this like neutered financial asset. That is not what we want. Like, you can believe me or not believe me when I say that. You can think I'm just like, oh, like doing PR or something, like you're retarded for doing that, but like, this is the truth. Like, believe me or not. But like, that's not our goal. Does that mean we're right or wrong, or that we always get it right or wrong? Like, yeah, I mean, maybe we have it twisted. Maybe we like have the wrong view, but it's a good faith view. It's we're engaging in good faith. We want to see this thing succeed. Maybe we have a different set of assumptions you do. Maybe those assumptions are wrong, right? But we don't like, it's not a like self-centered profit maximizing mindset. It's a legitimate belief and view over what has to happen for Bitcoin to really win. And I think most people at the company would agree with what I just said, is you have to tread this narrow path. And if you punch Rome in the face when you're just a gaggle of like nomads with spears, then Rome fucking kills you. Right?
Swan's trying
you gotta lure Rome out into the tundra and make them chase you for a long time till they're tired, you know? And then you hit them with arrows.
Absolutely. Swan Bitcoin is trying to sack Troy alongside the plebs, is what I just heard. But we just got to be calculated.
The way you described that, though, threading that needle. I'm just
talking about ancient Greece, dude.
That's a very pragmatic, and I've never heard anyone kind of describe it that way, and I think that's exactly the right path. Because I mean, it's a very difficult, and there's no way that you can identify or exactly get that right, but I think that's the trajectory that is the correct one, because on either side, it seems too treacherous.
I don't know how you get so like, what is the positive outcome? The positive outcome is Bitcoin is a global monetary network that both empowers savers and people the freedom to transact the world over. And I don't see how you get that leaning to either extreme. Like, you know, like we said, like, I don't see Monero getting there. And I don't see custodial ETF world like neutered gold getting there. Like, you need something in between that is, you know, able to kind of gradually grow and expand the Overton window and move along. And like, it's a process. And like drawing the ire of the empire, drawing the Death Star down on you because you're flinging stones at it. I mean, good luck, man. I maybe I'm completely fucking wrong and you're a brilliant coder and you guys have the perfect rebellion cooked up and you're just going to win. And like, I'm too conservative and whatever. I don't think so. I don't know that I'm right. Like,
well, you said this earlier, and I think this is exactly the reality of the world. It all comes down to kinetic energy, right? Like, it doesn't matter if they can find you and they can black site you, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, you gotta maintain that, like, that equilibrium there. Otherwise, you end up with a bag over your head getting waterboarded or something, you know?
Yeah, you need the necessary humility that comes with being a meat puppet, which we all are.
And sometimes you got to back into that dildo.
You know, what is that? Oh my God.
Dude, by the way, I gotta pee really bad. Like, really, dude, I wanted to say that my point was I'm out of my game, dude. Like, horses learn to hold it, I think, when they're racing, and like, haven't been off for a few weeks. Like, the bladder's not trained, but this is good for me. I'm gonna dig in. I'm here for it. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, but so what's that quote? It's like Milton Friedman, or it's somebody, it's an Austrian dude, or like,
oh, what I just said about backing into a dildo?
No. The only way we'll ever take money back from the state is through some roundabout way.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't say like, you know, lead a crusade at the walls of Rome, right? Like, it's like, I think most people who have spent time thinking about like, how do you wrest control of money? Like, how do you take this thing and fix some of these core issues? Like, you are effectively at an orders of magnitude power deficit, and all of your strategy needs to be rooted in that simple truth. And, you know, like it's challenging, it's tough. And I wish that we as a community could have a little more, and this goes on all sides. I believe most people are engaging in good faith. I think the people that really want to accelerate development on Bitcoin, I think they're engaging in good faith. I think the people that are a bit more conservative are in good faith. I even think the people that are really conservative are in good faith.
Yeah.
Like, I think we need a little less of this, like, everyone's a bad guy that's trying to stop your glorious plan, and more that, like, we all want to see this thing succeed. I don't think there's many people out there that are like in these dialogues. There are people in the world, but there's not a ton of people, I think, on Bitcoin Twitter that are in this back and forth, that like only want to see number go up and don't give a shit about anything else. They don't care if we totally lose the essence of Bitcoin in every imaginable way, but hey, we're rich. Like, I don't think that's a large number of people. I think people just differ on what the optimal pathway is. And instead of like letting that turn into just like ad hominem attacks and full on assaults against each other, like, maybe we could listen a little bit more. Cause like I said, when I look at the people having these debates, I see good arguments from the devs. I see good arguments from the people arguing with the devs. Like, there are different views. Devs are frustrated because a lot of the like criticisms are not specific. It's like, oh, well, this could enable this. Like, okay, can you give a specific example of what that would enable? Like, what would it actually enable? And that's both valid, and it plays on an information hierarchy where the devs, of course, can think of more specific examples, and the people that are less technically sophisticated aren't like, well, you could like concatenate like these two variables together and like, you know, like, yeah, the guy's not going to say that. And, but like, just take a fucking step back and take a breath and assume people are actually engaging in good faith until it is like resolutely proven otherwise. Because from my perspective, most of them are.
Yeah. And it's also good. I mean, we talked about getting scammed by hackers. When they want to scam you, they try to force things on you, right? Quickly now.
Yep.
When these upgrades are happening to Bitcoin, it's the same kind of situation, right? You don't want to take that quick route, and you don't want to not, you know, you want to have, hopefully, the devs, the people that actually know what they're doing, have thought out every possible attack vector this could open up. And we don't want to rush these things. There's no reason to do it, because sitting in stasis, at least for the interim, is not a terrible thing.
Yeah. And that's a frustration, right? So to the kind of accelerationists and the devs and the people that think we need to move this forward, that I think you guys have a lot of good points. There's a theme of urgency. There's a pressure that is being felt right now on Bitcoin Twitter. It's like, we need to do this now. It's an emergency. Regardless of if you are right or wrong, that tactic at scale is distrustful. It will turn people off. Urgency is the number one tactic of scammers, right?
Yeah.
We just talked about this. It needs to happen now. Like, that, you're not going to persuade people like that. Like, you're not going to persuade people like that. And if you're not interested in persuading people, and you're not interested in reaching a consensus, and you just want to fork and you want to fragment stuff, then fine, don't care about that. But if you are interested in consensus, if you are interested in like, we actually, like, this is the group of people that cares about Bitcoin. Like, these are your fucking allies. Like, they're not your allies. Like, these are your allies. Like, if you're actually concerned about building consensus or a coalition, like, there's persuasion and education that needs to happen, not banging the gong and it's an emergency, do what we're telling you, even though you don't understand it. And sure, I feel your frustration. Like, you've been trying to activate CTV for 3 fucking years. It's been ready for 3 fucking years. Like, it's not a new thing. You're frustrated. Everyone thinks it's a new thing. It's not. Like, OpCat has been demanded for a long time. I get it, man. I get it. It's frustrating. We don't get it. We're uneducated. You guys are much more educated on the technical stuff. Like, we're trying to play catch up. But guess what? Like, those are the people in the trenches with you. So grow the fuck up.
Yeah. Yeah. And as the great Milton Friedman once said, we referenced it earlier, just don't back into the dildo too fast. I think it was something like that. So be careful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a direct quote.
There's a lot of wisdom there, though. Just because you're the resident expert, and this translates to a lot of other themes in life. Like, if nobody's with you, you're sitting in isolation like a loser. You have to bring the plebs along with you. You have to bring a couple boneheaded firemen and a dude with some nice blonde locks and some freaking guns sitting in his back. Like, you have to bring every scale with you. If you go alone, you're not going to win fights.
Yeah.
So,
like, you want allies, and like, you know, I get that there's frustration. I get that from your perspective, there's all these technical resources and people could take the time to educate themselves. And like, dude, everyone has a day job. Dan's been working fucking 80 hours a week to be a fireman. Yeah, he's going to like completely learn this fucking programming shit, like language, all of the, come on. Like,
I'm busy sitting in recliners and eating meals and watching the PGA Championship on duty, dude. I do not have time for that stuff. Yep.
Like, we need to do better. Like, I get the frustration. I get that these things have been ready for a while. I get that from your perspective, like, they're not that risky. They're relatively conservative changes. These are just opcodes. Like, I'm trying my best to really learn what that means. But like, you might be fucking right. You might be super right. These might be like very accurate takes, but like, let's take a breath and just educate and persuade a little bit. Like, this kind of headbutting is not gonna go well.
Yep. Steve, thanks for joining us, man.
Anything else
as we part ways here?
No, this was great. This was great. I love Bitcoin. I want to see Bitcoin succeed. I want to see Bitcoin increase liberty and financial autonomy in the world. It can't do that as like purely some like neutral gold thing. It can't do that as an ETF share. Like, we need a combination of these things. I think almost everybody I work with would agree with me on that heavily. Like, I think it's just a time for us as a community to like, there's so much like contention that I think happened after the block size wars. Like, we do need to figure out how to like make decisions as a community, and it's hard. It's super distributed. Like, we need to
a lot of assholes
muscle, man. And it's like, the community's a lot bigger, and Twitter is designed for outrage. But like, I've met a ton of Bitcoiners. I've been to 1 million conferences. I know a lot of people. I DM with thousands of people. Like, there's very few people I think do not honestly and authentically care about this thing. And like, if we could just learn how to like have a better process for reaching agreement on some decisions, like, things would go much smoother.
Yeah, we need a dictator.
Satoshi, come back, lead us to the promised land. Steve, we appreciate you, man. That was full of substance. You're great in this forum, and when you're on next time, we'll talk yogurt, we'll talk sun, we'll talk walking steps, but we got into some good applicable stuff. We appreciate your time, brother.
This was good. Great to be on, guys.
Thank
you.